November 2025, over the crowded air corridors near Okinawa, a Chinese Wing-Lung 2 armed drone slips to the edge of Japan's air defense zone. Beijing expects to gather intelligence unopposed, but within minutes, the Japan Air Self-Defense Force F-35. A stealth fighter silently close in, illuminating the drone with targeting lasers and forcing it to retreat. As Japan releases the radar data, global attention locks onto a seemingly routine intercept that instantly redraws alliance lines. Why did this single encounter backfire so spectacularly, and what does it reveal about a sky where every move risks escalation? Stretching southwest from the Japanese mainland, Okinawa sits at the crossroads of some of the busiest air corridors in East Asia. Commercial flights shuttle between Tokyo, Taipei, Hong Kong, and Southeast Asia, weaving through a dense patchwork of civil and military routes. Just beyond the island's shores lies a boundary invisible to the eye, but critical to national security, the Air Defense Identification Zone, often called the ADIZs. Unlike sovereign airspace, which extends 12 nautical miles from the coast and is protected under international law, the ADIZ is a buffer, an early warning belt where all aircraft must identify themselves and declare intentions, even if they remain in international airspace. The Okinawa ADZ stretches across the East China Sea, brushing close to the disputed Senkaku Islands, known in China as the Diaoyu. These rocks, less than 170 kilometers from Okinawa's main island, have become a focal point for regional tension. The ADIZ itself is not recognized by every nation, but for Japan, it is a line that signals vigilance. Any unidentified aircraft approaching this zone triggers a rapid response from the Japan Air Self-Defense Force, whose fighters stand ready at bases like Naha and Kadena. Kadena Air Base, the largest US military installation in the Pacific, sits at the heart of this airspace. Its runways handle over 20,000 military and civilian movements each year, sharing the sky with Japan's own squadrons and a steady stream of commercial jets. The proximity of these overlapping flight paths leaves little margin for error. Air traffic controllers at Kadena and Naha coordinate closely with civil aviation authorities, issuing NOTAMs, notices to airmen, when military activity spikes or unidentified contacts appear on radar. Most days, the ADIZ is a zone of routine vigilance. But the sheer density of traffic means that any unannounced orbit by a military drone, especially one capable of carrying weapons, is more than a technicality. It is a calculated risk not just to national security, but to the safety of hundreds of civilian flights passing overhead. In this crowded airspace, the boundaries are more than lines on a map. They are the difference between routine and crisis, between a quiet morning and a scramble order that can ripple across the region. China's military planners have invested heavily in what regional strategists call gray zone probing. These operations are designed to test boundaries, gather intelligence, and pressure adversaries without crossing the threshold that would trigger open conflict. Instead of fighters or bombers, the People's Liberation Army increasingly relies on unmanned aerial vehicles like the Wing-Lung 2 to push at the edges of air defense zones. The logic is simple. An armed drone can loiter for hours, collect sensor data, and transmit real-time video back to command centers, all while avoiding the political fallout of risking a pilot's life. Since 2024, Japan has faced a record surge in these incursions. The Japan Air Self-Defense Force now responds to over 1,000 airspace alerts each year, with a growing share involving Chinese drones. The pattern is unmistakable. Each sortie is a data point, mapping radar coverage, timing response intervals, and probing for weak spots. Drones like the Wing-Lung 2 are not only surveillance tools. Their hardpoints can carry precision-guided munitions, making every orbit a potential threat. As one regional strategist explains, gray zone activity is not about shooting first. It is about shaping the environment, learning how your opponent reacts, and signaling resolve without triggering escalation. The People's Liberation Army's expansion of its drone program reflects this doctrine. The Wing-Lung 2, once limited to export markets and distant deployments, now appears regularly near contested zones in the East China Sea. Each flight is calibrated, close enough to test Japan's reaction, but careful to remain just outside sovereign airspace. This pressure is not directed at Japan alone. The presence of United States forces at Kadena and the growing network of allied exercises in the region means every drone sortie is also a message to Washington and other partners. The alliance variable complicates Beijing's calculus. A probe that goes unchallenged might encourage bolder moves, while a rapid, coordinated response could reinforce deterrence and shape future behavior. In this environment, gray zone probes are not simple provocations. They are part of a larger contest over who sets the rules in the skies above Okinawa. At 10:14 Japan Standard Time, a radar operator in the Southwestern Air Defense Force Center caught the first sign of trouble. The contact appeared as a slow-moving blip skirting the southern edge of the Air Defense Identification Zone. Its altitude and speed profile did not match any scheduled commercial flights. Within seconds, the operator initiated the identification protocol and cross-referenced the radar cross-section with known signatures. The data pointed to a medium-altitude long-endurance drone, specifically a Wing Lung 2, a type the People's Liberation Army had begun using for reconnaissance and strike missions in contested airspace. The coordinates placed the contact uncomfortably close to Okinawa's busiest air corridors, an area where civilian and military flights often overlap. The intercept controller, a veteran of hundreds of alert cycles, reviewed the sensor fusion display. He toggled between radar, electro-optical, and satellite feeds, confirming the track was not squawking a civilian transponder and showed no flight plan. He keyed in a scramble order and transmitted the code to Naha Air Base at 10:17. The protocol was clear: intercept and identify, maintain safe separation, avoid escalation. Two F-35A fighters were already on quick reaction alert status. Fueled and armed, their pilots suited up and waiting in the ready room. The scramble alarm sounded, echoing through the hardened shelter. Within moments, ground crews swung into action, guiding the jets onto the taxiway as the pilots ran their checklists by memory. The word quick summed up the tempo. The fighters lifted off just after 10:21, climbing quickly and banking southwest. Their flight path was carefully deconflicted from commercial lanes by both military and civil controllers. The mission controller's voice crackled in the pilots' helmets, relaying the target's most recent heading and altitude. Each update came with a timestamp and bearing, the language clipped and precise. The controller's tone betrayed no emotion, but every word carried the weight of responsibility. In the command center, a wall of screens tracked the intercept in real time, with senior officers monitoring the developing situation. The clock was running, every minute counted, not just for tactical response, but for the safety of the hundreds of passengers flying overhead. Throughout the response, the controller coordinated closely with Kadena Air Base and the Civil Aviation Authority. Notices to airmen were issued, rerouting a handful of commercial flights to maintain safe separation from the intercept corridor. The radar screen showed a growing patch of restricted airspace, a buffer zone that would keep the incident contained. As the fighters approached the drone's orbit, their emissions were minimized, relying on passive sensors and data links to avoid detection by the People's Liberation Army remote operators. The intercept maneuver was underway, the fighters closing the distance with tactical precision. From first radar hit to airborne scramble, the entire sequence played out in less than 7 minutes, a cycle honed by years of practice and a clear understanding of what was at stake. In the ready room, the on-duty F-35 officer described the moment as having no time to think about politics. The controller gives a vector, you get airborne, and you trust the data. The goal is always the same: get close, get eyes on, and show presence, while remaining painfully aware that one misstep could change everything. The incident clock had started. Over the next 30 minutes, every action would be measured, every decision scrutinized, as Japan's air defenses moved from routine vigilance to active engagement. At 10:33, the F-35A pilots closed the final distance, their aircraft still silent to the drone's sensors. The lead fighter's helmet display painted the GJ-2 outline in cool blue, confirming the visual match: a V-tail silhouette, 6 hardpoints under the wings, and the steady exhaust plume of a medium-altitude drone. For a moment, the two aircraft shared the same patch of sky, separated by less than 15 kilometers. The drone continued its programmed orbit, oblivious to the presence now shadowing it from below and behind. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's gloved hand hovered over the laser arm switch. The targeting system had already locked onto the drone's fuselage, its coordinates relayed to the mission controller. The final authorization came in a clipped transmission, approval code for non-kinetic illumination in line with standing rules of engagement. At 10:36, a pulse of invisible light lanced out from the F-35A electro-optical targeting pod, painting the Wing Lung 2 with a coded laser signature. To the remote operator, the warning would have been unmistakable: a sudden spike in the drone's threat receiver, the digital equivalent of a spotlight in the dark. Gun camera imagery captured the moment, crosshairs steady on the drone's center line, time-stamped and archived for the official record. The drone's response was immediate. Its flight computer broke the orbit, banking sharply to the southwest. The change in heading was abrupt, a clear signal of withdrawal rather than a routine maneuver. On the radar plot in the command center, the track line bent away from Okinawa's air corridors, retracing its path toward the edge of the Air Defense Identification Zone. Controllers watched as the GJ-2's radar signature signature faded, its velocity increasing as it exited the restricted zone. By 10:38, the last echo slipped beyond the boundary. The incident clock stopped at just under 30 minutes from first detection to final departure. No shots fired, no breach of sovereign airspace, but the message had been sent and received. The F-35As lingered on station for a few more minutes, sensors sweeping the sky for any sign of a follow-up. The airspace remained clear. Civilian traffic, previously rerouted, began to return to standard approach patterns under the guidance of air traffic controllers. In the ready room, the pilots would later review the gun camera footage, a silent record of the encounter, the laser cue visible only as a faint shimmer in the digital feed. In the aftermath, senior officers gathered in the operations center, reviewing the radar logs and sensor data. The event timeline was reconstructed down to the second. The visual identification, the laser authorization, the precise moment of turn back, all annotated and archived. The incident had played out as scripted in countless drills, but the stakes were real. For the crews involved, the outcome was a quiet affirmation of training and discipline. For the broader region, the encounter would soon become a case study in deterrence, transparency, and the evolving rules of engagement in contested airspace. The ability of Japan's F-35A fighters to close on the Wing Lung 2 undetected comes down to a blend of disciplined emissions control and advanced sensor fusion. The F-35's airframe is shaped to scatter radar waves, and its skin is coated with materials that absorb rather than reflect signals, contributing to its stealth. At typical X-band frequencies used by most airborne and ground-based radars, the fighter's radar cross-section drops to 0.001 square meters, smaller than a bird. In contrast, the Wing Lung 2 reflects up to 50 times more energy, making it an easy target for modern sensors. The real advantage, though, lies in how the F-35 processes information. Its ANAP-81, an active electronically scanned array radar, can sweep the sky in low probability of intercept modes, hopping frequencies and modulating power to avoid triggering the drone's electronic warning receivers. At the same time, the distributed aperture system, 6 infrared cameras mounted around the airframe, feeds a live 360-degree view into the pilot's helmet. Even in Okinawa's humid, haze-prone air, the heat signature from the drone's engine stands out against the background, detected at ranges far beyond what the drone's own sensors can manage. A sensor analyst from the Japan Air Self-Defense Force explains that against a target like the GJ-2, we rely on passive tracking. The F-35's distributed aperture system and electro-optical targeting system fuse infrared and optical cues with radar returns, building a picture that is greater than the sum of its parts. We can approach from below, mask our emissions, and never appear on the drone's threat board. This approach is reinforced by strict emissions control, and pilots keep their radars in passive or low probability of intercept modes until the last moment. The drone's own radar, designed for ground mapping and basic air search, lacks the sensitivity to pick up a stealth fighter until it is already inside visual range. In the Okinawa incident, the F-35s closed to within 15 kilometers before illuminating the drone with a targeting laser, all without tripping a single alarm on the People's Liberation Army operator's console. The tactical surprise was complete, and the data collected would soon inform both strategy and policy at the highest levels. Japan's Ministry of Defense moved quickly after the incident, publishing annotated radar plots and a summary timeline on its public data portal within hours. The release included precise coordinates and timestamps, offering a rare, real-time glimpse into the country's air defense operations. For many observers, this level of transparency stood out. It was not only a technical record, but a calculated message, proof that Japan could not only detect and intercept, but also account for every moment in the contested airspace south of Okinawa. The public disclosure rippled outward. Diplomatic cables from Tokyo to allied capitals referenced the incident as a case study in effective crisis management. Within days, the United States and Japan announced a new round of joint drone defense exercises, scheduled for early 2026, and Alliance diplomat speaking on background called the move a direct answer to those who question the credibility of regional partnerships. The sequence of events, intercept, documentation, disclosure, and allied coordination became a template for managing gray zone airspace challenges. Civil aviation authorities in Okinawa, meanwhile, reviewed air traffic logs from the day of the intercept. While no civilian flights entered the drone's orbit, air traffic controllers did issue a precautionary notice to airmen, and several commercial routes were adjusted to ensure safe separation. operation. The local impact was minimal, but the psychological effect lingered. An official from the Okinawa prefectural government remarked, "Our priority is always the safety of residents and visitors." Incidents like this remind us how close global tensions can come to everyday life. The episode left its mark on policy and perception. Japan's embrace of operational transparency reinforced public trust and reassured regional partners. The coming year's joint drills, already in planning, gained new urgency. For Okinawa's communities, the incident underscored both the island's strategic weight and its vulnerability. As drone incursions grow more frequent, the balance between deterrence, transparency, and civilian safety will remain at the forefront of Japan's defense debate. Today, every drone that tests these skies makes headlines and alters alliances. As China's unmanned reach grows, so does Japan's resolve to defend its airspace with cutting-edge technology and real-time transparency. The next encounter could come without warning. In this region, a 30-minute standoff can redraw the map of trust. What would your nation do at the edge of someone else's line?